You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 2. It's episode 60. Pete Alonso pounds the Cubs. Don't forget to listen, download, review. Most importantly, subscribe to our podcast. Follow us on the socials, Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, and Fly the W on Facebook, or email us at flythew670@gmail.com. All right, Crawly, happy Thursday, I guess.
I was a lot happier before the Cubs went to New York.
A lot happier indeed. All right, let's get after it because Pete Alonso, I know, Crawly, that you only pay attention to baseball for the most part. I know you're not a huge NFL guy. I guess you'll go to a Super Bowl party if somebody's got a good spread or the right IPA. But are you aware of Aaron Rodgers? You know who Aaron Rodgers is,
I know
right?
who Aaron Rodgers
Okay,
is.
and he does the whole, he did the whole thing with the World Wrestling Federation belt and told the fans, the Bear fans at Soldier Field, I own you. That's how I felt about Pete Alonso. Okay, I figured he's the next guy kind of doing the belt to the Cub fans. I own you. Okay, as we go through this, Crawly, he has now hit, I believe, 15 career home runs against the Cubs, and he only plays the Cubs a limited amount of times compared to playing the other teams in the National League East.
Yeah, it was absolutely, just stunning. And what's even more stunning is that the Cubs couldn't figure out not to pitch to him. What more can we say about Drew Smyly? At this point, it's almost a guaranteed loss. He has a 9 ERA in his last 8 appearances. And this one was bad right from the get-go. With 2 out and 1 on, Pete Alonso hits a home run that was sky high, carrying into the bleachers. I thought it was going to get caught, but it just kept sailing. That guy just hits him. The ball just travels when he hits him.
Yeah, it just travels differently. It sounds hard. It sounds strong. It's a sound you would want your favorite baseball player to make every time he touched the ball.
Right. And then in the bottom of the third, right, you got 1 on and 1 out again for Pete Alonso. And he hits a Smyly knuckle curve. It's just sitting right in the middle of the plate, 423 feet. Well, with the Cubs bullpen taxed after the series with Cincinnati and the Braves, Smyly had to eat some innings, and he ran out of gas in the bottom of the 6th when the first 3 Mets singled, and then he walked a batter with the bases loaded to make it 6-2. Caleb Killian came in the game and got Brandon Nimmo to ground into a double play to make it 7-2. And then he got Francisco Alvarez to ground out to end the threat. I thought that was nice work for Killian, inheriting the bases loaded, no outs, and he only gave up 1 run. But to me, Dustin, my question is why? Everybody saw this big storm coming. It's raining. Why waste them at this point of the time? Because the delay is going to be called. It's just was it going to be a half an inning or a whole inning? That's all you were going to get out of that. Right. And so that's what happened. So I was kind of dumbfounded they would use him in that situation.
You wonder what kind of, baseball is so analytical now, right? We talk about that all the time. We've got, numbers for everything. The Cubs brag about how since Theo and Jed came aboard, how they changed all of that, right? They were no longer holding press conferences along with the pesticides anymore, things like that. So you wonder what they use. Do they have a direct line to Skilling? We joked around about that off the air one time, you and I, right? Exactly what is it that the Cubs use? And I believe all of that also, if I'm not mistaken, the umpires are getting their information from some sort of meteorologist that's based in New York.
Right. And if anyone's interested, there is a good Cubs Twitter follow. It's called Cubs Weather, and it usually tells you what the weather is, where the Cubs are playing. It's one of my favorite follows because I just like to see what's happening. But
how's it going to be in Toronto with the roof shut?
With the dome, right? I'll double check. But I see this big giant blob and the umpiring crew. I'm not one to sit there and look. The Cubs have their own problems, but they don't need the umpires to kind of do that. The umpire crew is just awful in New York. And, the rain is coming down in buckets. The umps didn't cover the field. The mound's a mess. Kodai Senga comes out. They got this big lead. He slips while taking some practice pitches. It was completely mishandled. And I'll say one thing. Buck Showalter is lucky Senga didn't get injured when he slipped in that 7th on that wet mound. That would have been such a Met thing to happen,
Yeah, that would have been so Mets the way their season has gone. I don't feel sorry for them at all, but they ruined the last couple of days for me. So that's how game 1 went down. Buck Showalter out there. How about the offense against Cody Senga? Because this was a guy, Cody Senga was a guy that was on the Cubs' radar, and I think the Cubs wanted to give him some money, but he decided to pick New York.
Yep. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
That's what somebody famous once said, yeah.
The offense was mystified by Kodai Senga and his ghost forkball. Nico and Cody Bellinger seemed to hit him okay, but the rest of the Cubs hitters struggled. They had their share of opportunities, but struggled to get the big hit. They started the third with back-to-back singles, but Nico was called out on a very borderline pitch on a 3-2 count. And then former Cub Rafael Ortega robbed Ian Happ of a hit. Cody Bellinger will single and drive in the Cubs' first run. They're down only 3-1, but then when they were down 5-1, the Cubs had 2 on and 2 out for Cody Bellinger. He's going to single to left. He's going to score Nico, but Happ thought the throw was going to second, and he's rounding. He doesn't slide into third, and it looked like a cartoon. A slip on the base, flopped over. I thought he might have gotten hurt, and that was the end of the threat. And the Cubs never did anything against Kodai or any of the bullpen pieces. Nico did go 2 for 4, and Bellinger just staying hot as heck, 3-3 with 2 RBIs.
Yeah, that guy has been absolutely smoking hot. I'm sure when we get to the hot and not that Bellinger is going to make that list. All right, game number 2, Jameson Taillon. Things have been going his way of late, taking on Carlos Carrasco.
Yeah, we thought that the first game didn't look good on paper, and we thought the second game was going to be an easy one for the Cubs. J-Mo's been doing good. Carrasco's been doing bad. Thought the offense would bounce back. Nope. Not against Carlos and his 6.60 ERA, but it was a weird start to the game. They had pitch com issues for like 15 minutes, and nobody's saying anything to the announcers. To the umpires are mic'd up. They're not saying anything to the crowd like, hey, we're having this issue. Will be a moment or something. And so we're all just kind of sitting there. Like I said, it was annoying to me. But
one of the things I joked around about on the air. So, again, in the NFL, when the communication doesn't work in the helmets, both teams are not allowed to use the helmets that day, whatever their, fancy pitch com word is it for them. Here's how I feel. If the Cubs pitch com is working and they're the road team in this situation and the home teams is not, well, too bad for you. You're the home team. Get your IT straight and do better. Okay. Right. So if the Cubs pitch com, if the road team's pitch com is working and the home team's pitch com is not, too bad.
Right.
You don't get to use it.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like, I think we're one day going to get to a point where people don't even know how to throw signals down anymore, right?
Well, right. It's like, it's like texting now, right? Like people can't have a conversation because all we do is text.
Right. So the game started similar to the first game in the series with 1 on and 2 outs. Pete Alonso hit another home run to make it 2-0. For those of you keeping track at home, that's 3 in 2 games. Daniel Vogelbach was hitting right behind him, but apparently they wanted to try their luck with Alonso. But after that, Taillon settled down, and he only gave up 1 more hit in 7 innings. He retired the next 16 batters he faced. He looked excellent.
Yeah, that's awfully good. No doubt about that. So Taillon, another nice start for the Cubs, putting it together. So how did the Cubs get back into this one?
Yeah, because Taillon let them, they start slowly coming back in the 4th inning. Who else but Cody Bellinger hits a solo home run to cut the Mets' lead in half. Then Christopher Morel led off the 5th inning with a walk. Yan Gomes tied it up by hitting an RBI double. The next batter, Nick Madrigal, reached on a fielder's choice, but Gomes was thrown out at third, trying an El Mago slide. He tried pulling his foot back. I thought it's funny, a catcher trying to pull that. And then later on that inning, Nick Madrigal was picked off. So 2 base running mistakes in that inning. But the game was still tied at 2 when Mike Tauchman, the pride of Palatine, hit a solo home run to put the Cubs up 3-2. We just cannot say enough about that guy. The Mets had 2 on and 2 outs in the 8th, but Julian Merriweather got out of a jam, and Adbert Alzolay ends the game on a 1-6-3 double play. Tauchman 2 for 3 with a homer. Candelario 2 for 4. Gomes 2 for 4 with an RBI, and Cody Bellinger with that solo home run. But again, the story of this game was Taillon. The last time he pitched this well was also in New York against the Yankees.
Crawly, any truth to the rumor that Daniel Vogelbach is still trying to make it from home to first? He was the one that grounded out to Alzolay for that double play to end the game.
He is one beefy boy. I will tell you that. He is one beefy boy.
Yeah, but he has fun with it. Guy comes up to, at least last year, right? He used Milkshake, right, as his walk-up song. So he embraces being a husky individual.
Well, yeah, he was a former Cub, and both at one time you had both him and a very much bigger Kyle Schwarber. He's slimmed down Schwarber for a while. Yep. Vogelbach has not.
No, Vogelbach has not. Enjoying the Peter Luger Steaks out in New York City. So the series is tied 1 apiece. We get to game number 3. That was on Wednesday, and it was Kyle Hendricks throwing for the Cubs. Cubs looking to win their 7th straight series.
Yeah, everything was as predicted. We liked the Cubs' chances in games 2, and you start game 3 out with a bang. Christopher Morel batting leadoff, and he hits the first pitch he sees into the left field bleachers. The Cubs are up 1-0. Then in the second, Dustin, Seiya Suzuki, who's been in timeout lately, hit a triple.
I love that you're calling it timeout.
He hit a triple and scored on a pass ball to put the Cubs up 2-0. But then in the bottom of the 4th, Francisco Lindor hit a single, and Pete Alonso was up and hit his 4th home run of the series. Dustin, I was so angry. I was so frustrated because I'm just asking, why would you pitch to that guy in that situation? Now, Lindor has been hot. We had him on the hot list. We talked about the polar bear. But there's really one guy that's going to take you out of the yard and is danger. Everyone else in that lineup you're not scared of.
Yeah.
And why?
The worst possible outcome happened. Right? The worst possible outcome happened with Alonso up to bat. I just don't understand it. You're up 2-0. The worst possible thing that could happen happened.
And I was thinking back in the glory days of 2016, the Cubs took on the Nationals, and then manager Joe Maddon decided to take advantage of a slumping Ryan Zimmerman who was batting behind Bryce Harper. And Maddon says, I'm not going to let Harper beat me. He walked him 13 times in a 4-game series, including 6 times on that Sunday game. 3 of those walks intentional. What happened? Zimmerman went 1 for 7. He left 14 men on base. Javi Baez hits a walk-off home run on Mother's Day with that pink bat. I don't know what Ross was thinking. I don't know why he just didn't say walk him. What's one run? If it's a 2-run versus a 3-run home run, what's the big deal about that, right?
Right. I don't understand it. And he blamed the walk ahead. He blamed the walk. But it wasn't a walk. There was one of these games. They're all kind of clouding my brain. But he said the reason they threw to Alonso was because the runner in front of Alonso walked, and that was the reason why they did that.
Whatever reason it was silly. Hendo went 5 innings. He gave up 2 runs on 5 hits, 6 Ks, 2 walks. But then Hayden Wesneski came in and did not record an out. The first batter he faced, Jeff McNeil, hit a solo home run to put the Mets ahead 3-2, then gave up a double, a fielder's choice, and a single. And the Cubs were down 4-2, and Wesneski's night was done. Dustin, were you surprised on how David Ross used Wesneski there?
Yes. High leverage situation, middle of the game. That's not something that I remember him doing. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I missed that one. I must have not been paying attention when Hayden Wesneski came in a high leverage situation in the 6th inning. It didn't work out. I hope they don't do that again anytime soon.
Right. And I think with Hayden and I think with Caleb Killian, they're trying to kind of try these guys out for different roles. But when you're in a pennant race, man, and you've already dropped 1 game in the series, it wasn't the time for me to tinker, but who knows?
Yeah.
Now the Cubs had one more chance to win this game. Seiya Suzuki hit a solo home run to lead off the inning in the 9th, and the Cubs are now only down 1 run. Heimer Candelario singled and Mike Tauchman walked. So the Cubs have runners at 1st and 2nd and no outs. So David Ross decides, okay, I'm going to pinch hit for Miguel Amaya, put Nick Madrigal in there. The Mets changed their pitchers, and Ross called on Madrigal to bunt. Now, the bunt worked. The runners advanced to 2nd and 3rd, but now the Cubs had their first out. And Dustin, I am not a huge fan of bunts, and that one just frustrated me.
I know that it frustrated you. You're not the only one. It was a hot topic today on the Mully and Haw show. Gabe Ramirez was filling in for David Haw. I don't hate it. There were things that I disliked more, like pitching to Pete Alonso, like putting Hayden Wesneski in a high pressure situation. But I understand the argument, but I didn't hate it as much as I hated other things in that game.
Right. And I guess for me, you take a look at who's up, right? So the next batter is Christopher Morel. He has a high strikeout rate, right? So he strikes out for the 2nd out. Now you got 2 outs. Nico, who you trust 100%, he walks to load the bases, but Ian Happ struck out swinging, game over. Suzuki 3 for 4, though, with a triple and a home run. Candelario 2 for 4, but the team, Dustin, was 0 for 6 with runners in scoring possession and left 9 men on base. You get 1 hit with a runner in scoring position, you either have a tie game or you have the lead.
Right. Very, very, very difficult to win a game when you're 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position. Very difficult.
Well,
it's been done, but it's very difficult.
The Cubs' streak of 6 straight series ended in a disappointing thud in New York. Did they run out of gas? I don't know. Wednesday night was the final day of a 16 straight game days. They went 11-5, and that began July 25th. So no off days.
No off days. And again, if you tell me every 16 game days they're going to go 11-5, they'd have a really healthy lead. So I can't get too upset with them. I shouldn't, but that's just the way I am, Crawly. What have you done for me lately?
Well, the one thing I will say is that Ross has been managing with a sense of urgency. When Seiya Suzuki was struggling, guess what? He put him on the bench, made him a platoon player, and had him work with hitting coaches and with his work on his mental approach. Hopefully that continues. Then, Dustin, before the last game with the Mets, David Ross announced that Drew Smyly will be pitching out of the pen. The Cubs just couldn't continue to allow him to lose game after game after game. Pitching coach Tommy Hotovy, who's on the Mully and Haw show, he's going to be on next Wednesday at 9 a.m. He said, I think some of that just comes from a lack of confidence or consistency of doing it over and over again. Sometimes getting guys in the bullpen in short bursts to kind of reset and get your mind back into attacking the strike zone and simplifying things is the corner that you need to turn to realize, okay, now I'm feeling that success. So they're addressing that issue. The one issue that I'm waiting for Ross to address, though, Ian Happ. In the finale, Dustin, he went 0 for 5 with 2 Ks, one of those in the ninth with the bases loaded to end the game. When you look at Happ's numbers, I mean, this has been a rough season. In the last 7 games, he's slashing 143, 200, 286. It's he's definitely cold right now, but he's been cold most of the season right now. He's slashing 241, 367, but he has a 772 OPS. But I'm just thinking you can't keep batting this guy third. It's nonstop.
No, you got to move him down. I hope that that's something that they talk about today, the off day, and first pitch isn't until 6:30 probably our time tomorrow night on Friday night. So hopefully between now and then they either give Happ a day off, and I'm not saying he hasn't earned it, or they move him to at least 5th, move him down to at least 5th in this lineup.
You have Cody Bellinger, who is otherworldly right now, and he's batting like 5th, right?
Right,
and
4th or 5th lately, right? Mm-hmm. But that 4th is new. He had been batting 5th and 6th a bunch this year.
Right, and now they got Heimer Candelario, who's also tearing it up. He's batting 7th most of the time.
Makes absolutely no sense. You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. Pete Alonso pounds the Cubs. It's season 2. It's episode 60. And in this segment, Crawly interviews Matthew Trueblood, writer and editor at Northside Baseball, to discuss some issues the Cubs are working on right now.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, writer and editor of Northside Baseball, Matt Trueblood. Matt, how you doing today?
Doing great. Good to be here.
It was a little bit of a nail biter last night, to say the least, huh?
Yeah, I mean, really, you hardly have to bite your nails anymore with Adbert. He's been so impressive. But going through the heart of the Mets lineup with a 1-run lead on the road, another notch in his belt.
Right, and tonight is interesting because they are going to be facing a lefty, and so that means Seiya Suzuki is going to be in the lineup. And you wrote an article that caught my eye the other day about Seiya Suzuki. Now, I know last season was going to be tough for the guy, right? New country, new culture, new city, new teammates, new league. I wasn't expecting much, but I did have high hopes for this season, and it hasn't panned out. And you wrote about this. I mean, Seiya has lost his starting spot for the time being. What do you see going on right now with Seiya Suzuki?
I think it's a couple of things. And you're right to point out, we can't make excuses on this kind of basis forever for him. But if you even go back to when he first came over, well, that was the lockout truncated spring training. And then this year, because of the oblique injury, he didn't really have a spring training. And I think we've seen frequently during his time in the States a timing issue where his swing, he's very good at adjusting mid-swing and getting the bat to the ball. But when he does that, he tends to give up a lot of his power, a lot of the authority of his contact. On other occasions, we've seen him really scorch the ball. So we know that power is in there. He's not getting to it right now because I think the way his swing is engineered, he has to guess right. He has to know what's coming and roughly where it is to put the good part of the bat on the ball consistently. And he's just not able to do it. And that's got some to do with again, timing stuff. It's got to do with approach. He's a very patient hitter, but I think we're bordering on maybe even past the border of too patient. So he's got to make some significant adjustments, and I think some of them might have to wait for the offseason. But I also think there are some things that they're hoping by giving him more time off here on a matchup basis, just tactically, but also to sort of reset and maybe rethink his approach, that he's going to be able to take that even in the short term of the stretch run here and hopefully get back on track. Maybe not the guy we all envisioned or hoped for, especially coming into this season. Like you said, I had high hopes for him too, but something more consistent than what he's been this year.
Right. And you're talking, this is year 2 of a 5-year deal. And he's taken up in right field. He's taken up, a position that you traditionally look for power for. And once again, I mean, in your article, you kind of talk about a lot of the power that he's having, unfortunately, is going right into the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's part of, his swing and the way specifically that he'll adjust. He gets a good bat speed going, but he does not want to swing and miss. And he just sort of very naturally adjusts his bat path, his hand path mid swing when he sees, catches sight of some spin or some cue that tells him, oh, this isn't the pitch I was expecting. That can be a good thing, but it also tends to mean that he's either hitting sort of lofted sort of flares, looping liners. We've seen a lot of those singles that are going to be singles all the way, but they're never going to be doubles from him, where he sort of scoops it over the infield. And we've seen a lot of like 110 mile an hour ground balls. What we need to start seeing more of is 110 mile an hour fly balls, right? And I know that's a lot to ask, but something in that general range is what you're trying to produce more consistently in the major leagues. And I think some of that is an approach change that he's having to make mentally from what he had a lot of success with in NPB. Some of it is dealing with, he's had multiple injuries that have interrupted his opportunities to get playing time and get in a rhythm. But at a certain point, again, he's got to perform, or right now the Cubs have a lot of good options and he does just have to slide to the bench, even if it's only most of the time for the next couple of months.
Were you surprised at how quick kind of David Ross made that decision as far as benching him?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I feel like Ross really flipped a switch. The last couple of years, there wasn't a lot a trusted veteran, and especially a highly paid veteran, could do to, lose their job under David Ross. And I think whether he was taking a cue from the front office or he was taking a cue from his own players surging the way they did right before the deadline and forcing the front office to buy, things have made a sudden sort of a quick change where, now everybody's being held accountable. Now Trey Mancini's out. Now Patrick Wisdom's not going to see the field unless and until he earns it all back. Now, Nick Madrigal's been playing better than Seiya Suzuki, so you get another versatile piece in Jeimer Candelario, and you use it to nudge Suzuki out of the lineup instead of Madrigal the way maybe we all envisioned. It does surprise me a bit, but it's certainly a good thing, as opposed to even earlier this year when he just kept running out Mancini and even Eric Hosmer.
Oh yeah. And the other thing that I kind of wonder is it seems to me like Seiya really puts a lot of pressure on himself mentally. And, we both know, everyone knows baseball is a game of failure. You're going to have your failures, but you can't let the last at bat impact the next one. You got to be ready and clear your head. And it seems to me like he just gets so down on himself that he can kind of get himself in these funks.
Yeah. Without getting into the trap of assuming we know more about his personality than we do, he really seems like an intense guy. And that's the personality of this whole positional core they've assembled, right? Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner, Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki. Those 4 want it bad, and they hold themselves to extremely high standards. And I kind of wonder, and again, not to pretend to know things I don't know about the inner workings, but it's got to be hard when you're Japanese, you're coming here, it's not your first language that most of the clubhouse is speaking, and it's not even a language that most of the clubhouse is at least mildly conversant in, like Spanish, right? There's got to be a little bit of an isolating or a lonely feeling of, I'm struggling, I demand way more of myself, And it's hard to just have those, to chop it up with a couple of guys, even though I know they all want to do that and they all work together as best they can. I'm sure that's another element to it where it's just hard when you're a person who's as driven and as, again, demanding of himself as Seiya is, to not necessarily have some of the outlets that some of the other players in that clubhouse might have.
So David Ross did mention that Seiya's starting tonight against the Mets, against David Peterson, a lefty. So do you believe that this is a good start or a good step to get Suzuki back on track?
Yeah. I mean, he's really, ever since the weekend, he's had, I don't know, 3 or 4 games off, but for a pinch hit appearance or 2. That should be enough time for the mental reset, for the basic stuff you want to do. Like I said, I think there are things about his swing or his approach that may have to bleed into the offseason to say, now we have time. We can get you into a different timing pattern. We can maybe adjust the relationship between your hips and your shoulders in terms of rotation. That stuff might need to wait. But there are some cues that he can probably lock in on over these few days, working with the hitting coaches, working in the cages, because you still want him to be a valuable weapon down the stretch here. It's just going to be, and again, this is a good problem because of the way Mike Tauchman is playing, you end up only needing him in a sort of role player position rather than hoping that he was going to back cleanup every day, which is where we were when we came into the season.
Yeah. Now, another issue that you discussed, and it was, I saw a conversation between you and Greg Zumak. Greg has been on the show before, but having to do with inning loads, right? Justin Steele recently has pitched more innings this season than he has his entire career. And for those of us that were brutally scarred by what happened with Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor in 2003, it is something when these young guys are throwing more than they ever have in the past. And, you have an injury to Marcus Stroman. You had struggles with Smiley not going deep. And then in the first half of the season, it was Tyone not being able to pitch and go deep. How concerned are you with some of the young arms that the Cubs have and the amount of innings that they've thrown so far?
With Steele specifically, I'm not especially concerned. And I want to clarify some of the differences that exist between, again, those cases that have traumatized us on this one. Justin Steele is 27, 28 years old.
Yeah.
It's not like Kerry Wood. And what we might even count as pitcher abuse these days, which Justin Steele hasn't even undergone. I mean, this last start against Atlanta was easily the most grueling of his career. And it would have been like an average start for Mark Pryor in 2003.
Wasn't 123 pitches.
Right. I mean, they were getting into the 130s on the regular, and on hot days, they'd be working 8 innings. This is not that. And Steele, again, is older. He's out of what sabermetric people used to call the injury nexus, where once you're 25, 26, the structures in especially your shoulder and even your elbow are just a little more fully formed and set. And that doesn't mean he's safe from injury. And I don't want to create a false sense of security for people, but it's also inevitable that the Cubs have to lean on Justin Steele down the stretch. This is a team that's in a position to win. If the season ended today, they're in playoff position, right? You can't quit on that team, and you can't ask the ace of that team to throttle way back or start piggybacking him or skipping his turn in the rotation especially when the other co-ace of the team is on the injured list and wasn't reliable even before that. So we have a lot of uncertainty about when he gets back. They have to keep sending him out there. I think they'll lengthen out the rotation, use 6 guys here and there, try and give him some extra rest. But, you just can't coddle people at this stage, given where he is in his service time progression, what his age is. And I think especially that dude's a bulldog. He wants to be out there. So just let him be out there.
Well, you mentioned a 6-man rotation, and that gets interesting. Now we're about a couple weeks out, a little bit more, like 3.5 weeks out from expanded rosters, but it's not the old school expanded rosters. Remember where you basically couldn't fit everyone into the dugout? They limit that now. Talk to our listeners about those limits that's going to occur on September 1st.
Yeah. So obviously it's very different. It used to expand from 25 to 40 on September 1. And few teams called up their entire 40-man roster. That was impractical. But by the end of the year, teams would have 32 or 33 guys. Even for a contending team that didn't have a lot of playing time to spread around, suddenly you had 2 tactical pinch runners. And Your bullpen had 4 extra guys, including 2 long men who had been starters in AAA. All that is gone. You carry 26 most of the year. On September 1st, it becomes 28. 2 extra slots, and you need to preserve the same balance where you're not allowed to have more than half your roster be pitchers. That rule applies throughout the season, and it applies in September. So they can basically call up 1 position player and 1 pitcher on September 1. That helps. There's still quite a bit of help in that. Depending on how you choose to use it, it can be that extra starter to go 6, maybe when you're at a soft point in the schedule, or you play 16 straight days like the Cubs are in the middle of right now. Or it can be an extra short reliever so that if you need to pull, Drew Smiley in the 3rd inning of a game, you're able to get through what becomes a bullpen game without zapping your bullpen for the following day. Either way, that does help. But it's not the same degree or kind of change that we used to see.
Now, when you talk about a 6th starter, the Cubs have options, and that's a good thing, right? Like, so, I saw Hayden Wesniewski the other day. I thought he pitched really well against a very, very good Braves lineup. Javier Assad has been an unsung hero of this team. He struggled to start the season after a fantastic World Baseball Classic, but now he's looking more and more like that guy we saw in the WBC. Could you see a couple starts where Assad and Wesniewski maybe piggyback and try to go 6-7?
Yeah, I think especially if they get Stroman back and he looks more like his first half self, which I think a lot rides on that anyway. They may try to piggyback one of those guys with Drew Smiley, try to get the other one through 5 innings here and there. It also helps that they just recalled Caleb Killian, and I think with a little more faith than they've had the last couple times they've had to call on him in the major leagues, Killian can now sort of fill a long relief role in the bullpen, which frees up a Wesniewski or an Assad to make those spot starts and be treated more as a part of the rotation, or that now old-fashioned. When I was a kid, it was a normal thing to have, but nowadays the swing man is almost a role that's gone from the game. Well, I think that's where Wesniewski and Assad are now. Now that Killian can take up the permanent sort of long relief role in the pen.
So you wrote an article on Northside Baseball recently about Caleb Killian. He's, when you talk about Killian, that was the Chris Bryant trade, and we're looking at him, and he came up once against Miami, and I thought they put him in a bad position. He was off on his rotation and all that stuff. What's the difference between, because Caleb came in the other day, I believe, and it was bases loaded, no outs, and he gave up 1 run. I mean, that's pretty darn good in my book. But what do you think the differences are between the Caleb Killian we saw in Miami versus what's happened since then?
There's a few of them, and it's a good thing. I don't want to pretend that he's transformed back into the top prospect that maybe we all briefly dreamed on last May or June, but this guy has made some real progression as the year's gone on. His fastball's picked up about 1.5 miles of velocity, or 1.5 miles per hour, since May. So that's important right away. He's also getting more comfortable. The tension for him when he first came over from the Giants was between, do you let him be this sort of sinker cutter guy, or do you try to get him, because he has sort of a up high arm slot, do you try to get him throwing a 4-seamer that rides to the top of the zone, the more trendy kind of pitcher in the big leagues these days? He really got lost in the weeds trying to decide which of those two he was going to be, and sort of going back and forth in between them. And then there's a final step when you realize that you might be one of those pitchers who needs to just be able to do both without you being excellent in either by themselves. And that is a tough sort of integration process. He's completed it now. He's comfortable with his 4-seamer. He's comfortable with his sinker. He knows how to use them both against right-handers and left-handers, which pitches they set up and which they don't, where he can have success locating them. And also, he's just made a slight change to his release point that's giving him not only more velocity, but more ride on that fastball, so that he can access a little bit of the top of the zone that he might not have been able to before. His numbers were pretty strong in AAA, and that's a league right now that is in chaos for pitchers because the automatic strike zone they're calling is teeny tiny, especially what we would call the top of the zone in the major leagues, stops way lower. He was able to overcome that. So clearly he's figured out a lot of things in a short amount of time. And it doesn't mean he's going to be a superstar. He still doesn't have really what I would call a standout secondary pitch at this point, but he's gotten comfortable with the cutter. His pitch mix looks a lot like a Javier Asad's or a Adbert Alzolai's at this point. I don't want to overexcite people by mentioning those comps because obviously they look great this year. But I think that's the range of success that he might finally settle into. And it's just going to be that it took a little longer than we might have imagined, just as it did with Alzolai.
Right. Now, Assad, Wisniewski, and Killian on the roster right now pitching. Two guys in AAA, Jordan Wicks and Ben Brown. We've had Ben Brown on this show. Great kid. You know, you think that one of those two are going to be the pitchers that's going to be called up on September 1st. As of right now, who do you think has the inside track, and what can we expect from both of those guys?
Yeah, that one's tricky, and I think a lot of it depends on Brown's health. He's on the injured list in Iowa right now with a lat issue that isn't considered a super serious one, but you just never know, right? Once a guy goes on the shelf, I'm not going to count him as ready to potentially be promoted to the majors till he gets off the shelf and shows you that he's still got the same stuff and command. I think Brown, if he checks off those boxes, has that inside track just because he's already on the 40-man roster and he'd been pitching in AAA longer before hitting the injured list than Wicks has been since he was promoted from AA. Those are two very important advantages. So I would probably lean Brown. I think it's quite possible. You know, we're still 3 weeks out even from September 1st, but I think right on September 1, you could see a reliever called up instead. Someone like Bailey Horn, the lefty reliever who's been looking pretty good most of the time lately. Or even Tyler Duffy, the veteran reliever who his stuff is way down, but he's having success in Iowa. He's the kind of pitcher that the Cubs find and sometimes manage to do stuff with, even though their fastball is underwhelming. You could see one of them come up right away. And then maybe in the second week of September sometime, that's when, whether it's Wicks or Brown, the one who's sort of proved themselves ready does come up and make a spot start and maybe stick with the team the rest of the year.
Well, we got some things to be looking out for right now. So, you know, we're going to be watching the start tonight and see what Seiya does. We're going to be watching these pitchers and seeing if Ross goes with the 6-man rotation. Matt, I appreciate you jumping on. Where can our listeners find you on social media and where can they read your work?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, X, whatever we're going to call it, at Matt Trueblood. And most importantly, the website that I help run and write on just about daily is northsidebaseball.com. We got a good thing growing there and hope you'll stop by.
I love the articles. It's why I wanted to have you on, Matt. I appreciate you, and hopefully we'll talk to you again in the future.
Same to you. Thanks.
This is segment 3 of season 2 of episode 60 of the Fly the W podcast. It is Pete Alonso pounding the Cubs, and Crawly, I hope your Thursday is going better than the Cubs Wednesday went out in New York, unless you were Pete Alonso. Let's talk about the news, the roster moves. We'll preview the Blue Jays. We'll talk some hot and not, but one of the big days on the Crawly calendar, the announcement of CubsCon.
Well, yeah, when we do have an announcement with CubsCon, it was kind of surprising because it was very last minute. It was like the email came out yesterday and the tickets were put on sale today. So Cubs Convention, if you're not aware, it's every Martin Luther King weekend. This is going to be the 37th annual CubsCon. It's going to be January 12th to the 14th. They're going to have autograph sessions, panel discussions with Cubs legends, players, and coaches, the Cubs authentic auctions where you can pick up some great memorabilia, player meet and greets, interactive exhibits, and my favorite, CubsCon bingo, where, Dustin, if you remember from last season, the big Trey Mancini announcement happened.
Yeah, it didn't work out, unfortunately. I like Trey Mancini. I think the guy's the goods, but hey, listen, maybe we'll do a preview piece, in December or something, and we'll take a guess. We'll put some odds up on who the Cubs might sign during CubsCon bingo.
Now, the other thing that's exciting is the Cubs announced what they're going to be doing for the Hall of Fame ceremonies. If you remember CubsCon last year, Tom Ricketts announced Sean Dunston and Mark Grace are going to be the two newest inductees into the Cubs Hall of Fame. Last year, if you remember, they just rushed through it. I felt it was one day. It was Pat Hughes. It was God with the afro. It was Pat Hughes. It was Buck O'Neil.
Yeah. Buck O'Neil. Gosh, what are we thinking of here? He's got like the famous baseball card.
He's got the famous fro, and it's absolutely skipping my mind right now, but I'll get there. But what they're going to be doing this weekend is Jose Cardinal. Knew it would pop up. But they're going to be doing something really cool this weekend where they're going to focus one day on Sean Dunston, one day on Mark Grace, and then one day for both of them. So Friday's game they're going to have the whole week, and they're going to have a pop-up stand it's in between the Cubs store and there's like a little golf store, and it's where all the different marquee stuff is. They're going to have all sorts of great archival stuff that you could see, like rings, and Ernie Banks's MVP award and Pat Hughes's Ford Frick Award will be on display. So there's going to be a lot of great opportunities to see some Cubs history. Anyone that knows me knows the fact that the Cubs do not have a museum is one of those things that drives me absolutely batty. But on Friday, they're going to be celebrating Sean Dunston. There is a giveaway that day, the Nike City Connect jerseys for the first 10,000 fans. Season ticket holders will get their picture with Sean Dunston.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah, there's going to be some special on-field recognition for Shawan, and so that's going to be exciting. On Saturday, there's going to be a Harry Carey bobblehead given out for the first 10,000 and a photo session with season ticket holders and Mark Grace. So that'll be going on. And then Sunday, pregame, they're going to have the players are going to get their plaques in the left field concourse of the bleachers. They're going to get on-field recognition, and they're going to do the seventh inning stretch. You want to get there early because they're going to have Sean Dunston and Mark Grace pins for the first 10,000 early arriving fans. So an exciting weekend of baseball that I will be very much looking forward to.
You know what I want to see? I want to see Dunston and Grace in full Cub gear circa 1980-ish, and see like a fungo hit to Dunston and a fire a ball off to Grace, who gives it a stretch in the stirrups.
Now, a lot of those guys' their big years came in the 90s. So would you want the Cuba jersey with that weird looking bear? Remember that jersey? It looked like it said Cuba instead of Cubs.
Yeah, I do remember that. Listen, I maybe dated myself more the 90s than the 80s, but yeah, that would be fun to see the two of them, Dunston to Grace once more.
Absolutely. Now, unfortunately, after this weekend in New York, the Cubs are still in second place, but just by basically the tiebreaker. They have one less loss. And so Milwaukee's at first, 62-54. The Cubs at 59-56. They're cooling down. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They had been 8-2 for a while. The Reds are struggling. They're lost 2 in a row, and they're 2-8 in their last 10. They're going the wrong way. And then Pittsburgh and St. Louis, they're still trying, so good for them, right?
Good for them. They're trying. They're not giving up.
Now, unfortunately for the wild card situation, the Cubs, if the playoffs ended today, would not be in the wild card because Miami took 2 of 3 this weekend, and so they have hopped over the Cubs and the Reds. So the 3 wild card teams now, Philadelphia, San Fran, and Miami. The Cubs are 0.5 games back on that last wild card spot and 4 games back of Philadelphia. I still think the division is the way to get into the postseason.
Yeah, more than likely that is the way to do it. Let's talk a little one roster move we know for sure, another roster move we're hoping for good news that we will hopefully get on Friday.
Yeah, Ryan Jemison was claimed off waivers by the Mariners. He was a right-handed pitcher, the Cubs' first-round pick, 27th overall in the 2019 draft. That moves the 40-man roster down to 38, so it gives the Cubs some wiggle room, but that's never a good thing to lose your first-round pick and get nothing for him. But that 2019 draft was not good for the Cubs, and that after that draft, Jason McLeod was moved out of the role of the draft, and Dan Kantrovitz was put in charge of that. And so you're starting to see some churning between the new Kantrovitz guys are taking up a lot more of the roster spots and positions, so we'll see what happens.
Now, the news we're waiting on, the big news, right? We need Marcus Stroman back in this rotation, assuming it's not the Marcus Stroman of the last 4 or 5 starts.
He got his cortisone shot, so he threw 40 pitches in the pen. Hope is that he only misses 1 start. He is eligible to return on August 16th, so about a week from
Wednesday.
Today.
That's Wednesday. Yep.
So hopefully he can go back to being the Marcus Stroman of the first half.
All right, let's hopefully the hip is good. Let's hope the blisters on the fingers are all cleared up, and let's hope it's onward and upward for him. All right, Cubs, Blue Jays, Crawly, starting on Friday outside of the country, up in Toronto.
Yes, the Blue Jays last season finished with a record of 92-70, good for second place in the AL East and home field in the wild card round of the playoffs, but they were swept in the playoffs by the Mariners 4-0 and 10-9. Offseason, they added Dalton Varsho as center fielder, right-handed pitcher Chris Bassett, first baseman Brandon Belt, center fielder Kevin Kiermaier, right-handed pitcher Chad Green, right-handed pitcher Eric Swanson. Remember Dustin wanting Kevin Kiermaier? I guess it worked out good for the Cubs. They didn't get him.
Yeah, I do remember that name. Yep.
Key losses, right fielder Teoscar Hernandez, left fielder Lourdes Gurriel, catcher Gabriel Moreno, right-handed pitcher Ross Stripling. This season, the Blue Jays are 65-51, good for third place. That puts them in third in the AL East behind the Orioles and Rays. Unreal.
Imagine the Cubs record at that, and if they were, had that record in the National League Central, where they would, how we would be feeling right now.
We'd be cruising on easy street, my friend.
Yes, we would.
One thing to pay attention to is the defense of the Blue Jays. They are currently the best defensive team in baseball with a DRS of 60 runs. That's 60 runs saved, while the Cubs are tied for third in DRS with 31 runs saved. So you can see the big difference even between first and third place.
Oh, yeah. Big difference.
Now, they did wrap up a 4-game series that they split with the Guardians, so they are definitely probably landed already in Toronto.
Yep, they're back home. They'll get to sleep in their own beds. Cubs are sleeping in a very nice hotel in Toronto. So both teams should be ready to go tomorrow night for game number 1.
Yep. So game number 1, we are taking a look here at Javier Assad and Jose Barrios. For those of you who are wondering, it is on Apple TV. So if you don't have Apple TV, or even if you do, turn on 670 The Score and listen to Pat and Ron.
Always good advice. Always good advice.
I've been using the Audacy app more and more, depending on when I'm out, So if I'm out somewhere and I'm kind of just hanging out, going for a walk, playing some Frisbee golf or something, I'll throw on the Audacy app and listen while I'm walking around.
Very nice.
Javier Assad gets the start. It is his second. It was going to be his third start of the season. He started 2 games so far, one time as an opener. But this is a guy that really has lately been picking up the slack from J-Mo and some of the guys, not J-Mo, from Drew Smiley.
Yep.
And so his last game he pitched in was against Atlanta. He went 3.2 innings, gave up 5 hits and 2 earned runs. He pitched 3.2 innings against the Reds. He gave up 1 hit, 0 earned runs. And against St. Louis, he only pitched 0.1 innings and did not give anything up.
So that's okay, right? It's not great. It's not bad. We're hoping for a World Baseball Classic version, right?
Absolutely. He's going to be going up against Jose Barrios, known as La Máquina. I think he was Javi Baez's brother-in-law, if I got that right. But he's 9-7 with the 338. The Cubs are going to have their work cut out for them. This is a good pitching and defense team. His last start against Boston, Barrios went 5.2 innings, gave up 6 hits, 3 earned runs, struck out 6 and walked none. Against the Angel, he only gave up 1 run in 6 innings. And against the Dodgers, he went only 5 innings. He gave up 2 earned runs, but he also struck out 3 and walked 4. So his pitch count was a little bit elevated on that one.
Yeah, hopefully Javier Assad can do a good job. It'll be interesting to see who follows him, but fingers crossed on game number 1. Game number 2, always nice to see Justin Steele in the slot of the starting pitcher for the Cubs.
It's our security blanket right now, Dustin, as far as starting pitching is concerned, but he is 13-3 with a 2.68 ERA. His last game he pitched was against Atlanta. He gave up 3 runs in 6.1 innings. He had 7 strikeouts, but he also had 4 walks. You'd like to see that down. Against Cincinnati on 8-1, he went 6 innings pitch. He only gave up 3 earned runs, no walks, 6 strikeouts. So that was good to see. And against St. Louis, he went 6 innings, gave up 1 earned run, 4 strikeouts, and 3 walks. So really kind of be watching those walks, like to limit those.
Yep. Those always get you into trouble. And who's he facing, Crawly?
He will be facing Chris Bassett, 11-6, 387. I like this because it's another one of those measuring sticks that we talk about. If Justin Steele wants to be an all-star and an ace, he's going to have to win these kind of big pitching matchups right here. So Bassett is 11-6 with a 387 ERA. Last 3 games against Boston, he gave up only 1 earned run in 7 innings, struck out 6. Against Baltimore, he went 6 innings, gave up 4 earned runs in that one, 7 strikeouts, 2 walks. And against the Dodgers, He went 5 innings, gave up 4 hits, 2 earned runs.
All right. So, he's doing pretty well. Not fantastic, not awful. Good, good enough. Like to have a guy, you'd like to have a Chris Bassett in the Cubs rotation. So unfortunately, he is going up against Justin Steele. So we'll hope for the best. Game 3, though, Jamison Tyone. That guy's been doing it for the Cubs lately.
Jamison Tyone has been dealing, and God, I hope he pitches in Toronto like he pitches in New York. When you talk about Tyone, he's 7-6 with a 5.17 ERA. I mean, if he has another good game, his ERA is going to be below 5. So his ERA was close to 8. So he's almost cut his ERA in half at this point.
Pretty
Against
amazing.
the Mets, 7 innings pitch. He gave up only 2 earned runs, 7 strikeouts, and no walks. Phenomenal. Against Cincinnati, 5 innings, gave up 2 earned runs, 5 strikeouts, 2 walks. And against St. Louis, 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 4 strikeouts. So he has been absolutely solid for the Cubs lately.
Yeah, very, very good. Glad to see it. Seems like a good guy. He was on Inside the Clubhouse last weekend. If you didn't catch that interview, I highly recommend it to all of the listeners. Take a listen. I think you will like what you hear. Inside the Clubhouse every Saturday morning with Bruce and my guy, David Haw.
Right. He's going to be going up against Hyunjin Ryu. He's only making his 3rd start of this season, coming off Tommy John injury. So his first game was 8-1 against Baltimore. He went 5 innings, gave up 9 hits, 4 earned runs, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. But he did much better against Cleveland. He only went 4 innings, but he did not give up any hits, any earned runs, struck out 2 and walked 1. So this is a guy coming off injury. We don't know what to expect out of him. He had 1 good start, 1 bad start. So this is going to be a mystery, and so the Cubs are going to have to be aware of that.
Absolutely. Pay attention. Never know what's going to happen. All right. Who's hot? Who's not? And we don't even have to, it's a rinse and repeat. Hot, Cody Bellinger.
Cody Bellinger, he's 10 for his last 20. He's slashing 500, 545, 750 with 1 home run and 5 RBIs. Also hot, Mike Tauchman, 6 for his last 17 with a home run and an RBI, slashing 353, 476, 529. And Heimer Candelario, 7 for his last 21, slashing 333, 391, 571.
Well, that's pretty good.
Correct. But on the flip side, on the not, I
know the not, but I'll let you handle it.
But this was the problem in New York. You had Christopher Morel go 2 for his last 17 with 10 strikeouts and 5 walks, slashing 118, 318, 294. Ian Happ is 3 for his last 26, slashing 115, 115, 221. And Dansby Swanson, 2 for his last 21. He has 1 home run and 4 RBIs, but he's slashing .095, .136, .286. Those are 3, your designated hitter and your number 3 hitter and your number 5 hitter. You got 3 guys like that struggling.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing that you've been doing what you've been doing, considering all of that. And unfortunately, we've also been, when we do this hot part, we have been pointing out the hot player for the opposing team. And it seems like in recent memory, that hot player has continued to stay hot.
Yeah, we needed these guys to cool down. But right now, George Springer is hot, 12 for his last 24 with a home run and 4 RBIs, slashing 500, 519, 750. Davis Schneider, second baseman, is 9 for his last 19 with 2 home runs and 5 RBIs. He's slashing 474, 565, 789.
Now that's pretty good.
Yep, but on the not side, Danny Jensen, their catcher, is 2 for his last 15 with no home runs and no RBI, slashing 133, 235, 133. And then a name you all remember, Paul DeYoung, used to be with the Cardinals.
Unfortunately, he used to seem to beat up on the Cubs.
But right now he's struggling. 2 for his last 24. He's slashing .083, .083, .083. So not good right now.
Let's hope he holds form as he's been so far for the Jays. Let's hope that's what happens. All right, Crawly, it's prediction time.
All righty. This is going to be a tough one. I think that Toronto is a really, really good team. They're playing at home. They got pitching and defense. I see the Cubs taking 1 of 3. I like the Justin Steele matchup. And that third game to me is going to be interesting that's one that I kind of been sitting around trying to kick around because I don't know what Ryu's going to do.
Right. Well, 1 and 3 makes a whole lot of sense. I was thinking that, but I'm going to go 2 for 3. I'm going to stay optimistic. I like game 3 more than I like game 2. So I'm going to say the Cubs take 2 out of 3. So let's hope I'm right, and let's hope you are wrong, Crawly. That's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow us on the socials, Fly the W on Facebook, also Instagram, of course, on Twitter. You can email us, flythew670@gmail.com, and you can watch us on YouTube by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel.
Hopefully the Cubs can conquer the Canadians, the Toronto Blue Jays, and we can all cheer, "Go Cubs!" Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!